And in what way does saying that you find the Quran laughable in places, in what way does that help the spread of reason?
Oh, well, I think mockery of religion is one of the most essential things, because to demystify supposedly holy texts that are dictated by God and show that they are man-made, what you have to show their internal inconsistencies and absurdities. And one of the beginnings of human emancipation is the ability to laugh at authority. It's an indispensable thing. People can call it blasphemy if they like, but if they call it that, they have to assume that there's something to be blasphemed, some divine word. Well, I don't accept the premise.
The United Nations, I believe, starting with Pakistan, Pakistan tried to have a resolution that made the criticism of religion unacceptable. I just would quickly want to get particularly Mr. Hitchens' response to that, and also because you did write the introduction to Sir Kingsley Amis's book on everyday drinking, what's your favorite drink?
In reverse order then, Johnny Walker Black Label with Perrier as the delivery system. But no ice. Ice can be a mistake. Followed by a couple of bottles of Pinot Noir. With lunch only, I mean. With food. Very important to keep the food intake up. The United Nations is exceeding its authority in trying to limit any form of speech on any subject. I think it's particularly absurd for any attempt to be made to limit the criticism of religion, precisely because religion makes such large claims for itself. The Quran, for example, claims to be the last and final revelation from God. No further words are necessary after this immaculate recitation has been completed. It's therefore, in my view, implicitly very totalitarian. It says you can't need anything more. And it can be death, not just to challenge it, but to say that there have been any subsequent revelations. There are Ahmadi Muslims, for example. They're a small minority who believe there may have been a later revelation. And there are, in the Muslim world, the Baha'i sect, whose leader was claimed by himself at least to be a prophet. Therefore, they're punishable by death also. People who say that not only are we going to tell you what to do in that tone of voice, but you also can't criticize us, you can't have another opinion, have just revealed what the extraordinary dangers of the religious mentality are, and have confirmed that it is simply another form of mind-forged, man-made manacle.
Conflict is intrinsic to human history.
Yes.
And there will be some further conflict. Many people say it has already begun, and it's the conflict between the West and sort of Islamofascism. Do you think that is a conflict which can be lost by the West?
Well, first on conflict, you're completely right. It's unavoidable, and I'm glad of that, because I think it's desirable. Especially in the United States, there's a huge privilege given to the word unity or unification, partly because it's a very various and multifarious society. There's a big need for good manners. But if you say, I'm a unifier, not a divider, you expect and you usually get applause. I'm a divider. I think only division can cause progress. People say, the politics of division. Politics is division by definition. If there was no disagreement, if there was no fight, there'd be no politics. So the illusion of unity isn't worth having. And anyway, it's unattainable. What I do think of as the greatest crisis, greatest conflict at present is, it's a version of the old conflict, which is between totalitarianism and free thought, which is, in other words, between theocracy and the Enlightenment. And the form in which this is currently being played out, you could define as the West versus Islam, but it's not quite so. Within many Islamic countries, there are people who have a greater respect for pluralism than there are people in Britain who would like to censor me for criticizing Islam, for example. But roughly you described the outlines correctly. Yes, I refuse to be told what to think or how, let alone what to say or write by anybody, but most certainly not by people who claim the authority of fabricated works of primeval myth and fiction and want me to believe that these are divine. That I won't have. That's the original repudiation. The first rebellion against mental slavery comes from saying, this is man-made, it's not divine.
And to be clear about what you're talking about here, you're talking about the Bible and the Quran.
Yeah, well, and the Torah, yes. Yeah.
All of these are works of fiction.
All of these are depraved works of man-made fiction, yeah.
I think it's very, very important to get this clear. It is, of course, true that the existence of secular, sexually emancipated, scientifically oriented civilization is the root cause of terrorism. I think it's true. Because they would have nothing to attack, and nothing to envy, and nothing to blame their own failures on, were it not for this state of affairs. But that's as much as I'm willing to say. I'm not willing to make any concession based on that. I'm not willing to adjust my own behavior by 1 degree for 1 minute to please some verminous mullah or any of his fans. And I think that should be clearly understood. I could not forgive myself if I worked out ways in which to coexist with people with whom coexistence is first impossible, second undesirable. Yes, of course, if we were not trying to build up a federal democratic government in Iraq, the first ever such attempt made, and if we were not trying to get an oil plan that finally shared the oil instead of making it the private property of a sadistic crime family, of course we wouldn't be being attacked by the supporters of Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia. It's a matter of pride that they want to attack us. And that's why there are so many casualties in Iraq, because they don't care where they put their bombs, and they don't care who they kill. In fact, they take a particular relish in killing people who are from the wrong sort of Islam. It's a holy duty to put down the heretical Shia and to blow their children's limbs across the schoolyard, and it's a relish that's experienced every day, and there aren't enough soldiers in the world to stop the number of people who want to do this. But we're not going to give up on it, and we can't conceivably surrender on the point. And if the body count is to be used as an indicator at all, then it must be used in a serious and scrupulous manner. Millions of people died in Afghanistan because we didn't intervene there, because we left the country, because we abandoned it after the war against the Soviet Union was over. Millions of people died in Iraq because we left Saddam Hussein in power in 1991. Who knows how many millions of lives in Iran have been made miserable. We certainly know how many people were killed in the war with Iraq because the theocracy was left undisturbed there. Are we proud of the way that we neglected and abandoned Somalia to its fate in the way that we did? No, and all of this neglect and indifference and neutrality is what's led to the rise of the terrorist organizations. And you only have to look at what bin Laden says himself. He said defeating the Soviet Union was really hard. He says it at the wedding of one of his ghastly kids to one of Ayman Zawahiri's filthy brood. It's a very important tape to listen to. He said, many of us here lost many good friends in the great struggle to liberate Afghanistan from the Soviets. That was really hard fighting. That was a real jihad. That was really a bitter war. He said, but bringing down the next empire, the American one, that'll be relatively easy. They're feminized. They're queer. They're run by Jews and usurers. They don't want to fight. They don't believe in their own principles. They don't think anything's worth fighting for. They can't take casualties. Bring it on. We'll take them down easily. That'll be simple. It is to me fantastically important, really of the first and highest importance, that statement and the assumptions underlying it be comprehensively disproved. Comprehensively disproved. And their authors, those who make excuses for them, comprehensively destroyed. That's going to be the big fight between secularism and civilization and its enemies from now on. You better get ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you fear death?
No, I'm not afraid of being dead, that's to say. There's nothing to be afraid of. I won't know I'm dead. In my strong conviction, I won't. And if I find that I'm alive in any way at all, well, that'll be a pleasant surprise. I quite like surprises. But I strongly take leave to doubt it. I can't be too insouciant. I mean, one can't live without fear. It's a question of what is your attitude towards fear. I'm afraid of a sordid death. I'm afraid that I would die in an ugly or squalid way. I mean, cancer can be very pitiless in that respect.
That's a fear of dying. It's not a fear of death, though.
Quite. So I forget now which you asked.
What do you
It's a good distinction.
What do you think?
Of death, no. Of dying, yes, I feel a sense of waste about it because I'm not ready. I feel a sense of betrayal to my family, and I like to think even to some of my friends who would miss me. Undone things, unattained objectives, but as I said before, I hope I'd always have that if I was 100 when I was checking out. But no, I think my main fear is of being incapacitated or imbecilic at the end. That, of course, is not something to be afraid of, it's something to be terrified of.
Well, there is a functional and also a functionalist and man-made element to religion isn't doubted by anyone, certainly not by Frank Stoic. He would say about the Aztec priesthood, that's all it was a means of coercion by the ruling class and a means of terrifying others and a means of making them believe that there was a priesthood that could control things like eclipses or heal things like plagues. Yes, of course. When anyone looks at anyone else's religion, they see the trick being pulled easily. Everyone in this room is an atheist. There's not one of you who isn't. You don't believe in the Temple of Diana at Ephesus. You don't believe in the Egyptian Thor. You don't believe in Odin. You don't believe in Huatzicatl or the other Aztec gods. None of you do. You're all atheists as far as that's concerned. Some of you believe that one of these is okay and is true. I just say that I'll go you one better and say I'll be an atheist and I'll be a consistent one.
I'm not an atheist. I mean, I don't believe in Zeus or any of those other gods because all those other gods were inside the world. We have evidence that suggests that there's a being outside the world that created the universe. That's why I believe in him.
Bertrand Russell said, I believe that when I die, my body will rot. Full stop.
Well, who doesn't? I mean, it will.
That's it.
Yeah, well, that's... He does go on to say a bit more than that, but that's uncontroversial. I mean, nobody expects to get their old body back. I certainly don't want the body back that I'll die with, and nobody would. It would be doing no one any favours. So some reassembly of atoms would have to occur, but that would have to occur anyway, if only for us to be reunified with those who died so that we could live, and got blown to pieces for doing so.
Do you think it's been a life well lived?
I'd really have to leave that to others, Jeremy. I have to. I'm encouraged, I'll say this much, I've been encouraged in the last few months by some extraordinarily generous letters, including, these are the ones I take most to heart, from people I've never met or don't know. If they say that what I've written or done or said means anything to them, then I'm happy to take it at face value for once. I'll take that. And yes, it cheers me up. And I hope it isn't written with the intention of doing so, though I must allow for it possibly being for that reason. But in case you are watching this, anybody, and you ever wonder whether to write to anyone, always do, because you'd be surprised by how much difference it can make. Here's a regret, I regret not doing it more often myself.